Hello, Sunflower. You are watching Good Journeys Tarot, and I am Rosemary. Today, we will be chatting about the Knight of Cups and all that this charming guy has to offer us in the tarot. This has brought up a lot of things I have to resolve in my mind and in my deck, which we'll be talking about shortly. But before we do, as always, I want to share some of the things that have come into my life this week. Besides the pug who just entered the room. One is this book, which Lisa Papez had shared on her channel about its practices for things to do for the 12 nights of Yuletide starting on Yule, winter solstice. And I've been looking for something to do spiritually wise during that time of year, since I no longer am involved with a religious organization, as it were, and sharing in their celebrations. And so I'm going to give this a try. We're going to see how this works out. I'll let you know what I find that is useful and interesting. Maybe I'll even post during those 12 days. Hi, Jackie. Welcome. And the other things are all decks. I went a little bit crazy on the Black Friday sale, and I don't know, I was feeling like I needed decks to be a little bit more supportive and encouraging and that type of thing. So I have some very feel good decks, right? Hi, Scott. Welcome. One of those decks is going to be the Good Karma Tarot. The Good Karma Tarot actually removes all the esoteric and religious aspects of the cards. And it's a very pretty art style. I've etched it in multiple colors. And so I'm enjoying working with this. This week, I'm using this on Instagram for my daily card pulls. So do check that out if you want to see more of that deck. I also finally broke down and purchased Gabrielle Bernstein's decks, which are all drawn by Michaela Zera. And am using them, one by my bedside, one by my couch where I do most of my reading, and one for my work. It's just kind of like motivational, like inspiration, as it were. So her decks are the Spirit Junkie, the Super Attractor, and the Universe Has Your Back. And they all are very similar in that they have a back that's kind of like a flower pattern with an orb in the middle. The orbs and the flowers are different on each one. And they give you a little inspirational saying and a picture which goes with it. I've always been tempted by one of these decks, and I just never decided to grab them because they are kind of, I don't know, soft, I guess. To me, not hard tarot kind of stuff that I'm used to, but occasionally I do need that kind of softer inspirational energy. And so I'm glad to have added those finally to my collection of things to work with. The other thing that I got on Black Friday, and all of these were half off, so I just couldn't resist going ahead and grabbing them, is the Muse Tarot. When it first came out, I was not at all interested in the Muse Tarot because it was all female and because it was a collage style artwork. And but the Numinous Tarot has really opened me up to so many things that I rejected previously in decks. And I've actually been feeling the pull to work with an all-female deck recently. And so I decided to go ahead and grab the Muse Tarot. I did the edges in a pink and a green to go with the fronts of the cards, and it turned out really well. I'm really happy with that. I think I'll enjoy working with this. I'm probably going to keep it in my studio area where I paint and whatnot to work with the Muse As You Were. And then the last one that I got is actually a pre-order that came in finally. It was due out in November, and due to supply chain issues, it was delayed till December. And then my deck just disappeared. It said it was delivered. I waited 3 days like they tell you to, even though I feel like it's on them to find the product if it's not where they say it is. They don't feel that way. They're like, ask everybody you know, and then let us know in 3 days. Well, 3 days came and went. It wasn't there. So I had to order it again. And so it finally arrived this week. And that was the Mystical Medleys, which I am in love with. I'm so excited to have this deck because it really captures the esoteric of the Golden Dawn, but it adds this bit of whimsy to it. And this is my first Liminal 11 deck. And their packaging is just great. I mean, this is a gorgeous hard box to begin with. It opens at the bottom and it has thumbnails. And when you open it, look, there's the little devil. And then actually on this box, it actually has the devil card in like a background image there. And in the bottom of the box, which you can see now, is the star, which is kind of cool. And in the bottom of this box is the sun. I just love that. It is a hardback little white book, which I thought is kind of nostalgic, the way this vintage cartoons are. And it's a basic little white book. It's really cute. And then this is the deck, which I'm sure you guys have seen all over social media since it started coming out. Everybody in the UK's had theirs for about a month, and it's just started reaching the US. But it's traditional imagery, just in an animated vintage style, which I just love. This type of cartoon is something that I've been drawn to for a while, since they used it in Futurama to do some of the episodes. In fact, one of my favorite mini episodes was of a proposal that was done in this style. And so I'm very excited to have this deck. I love everything about it. It's probably one of the only decks that I don't want to modify in any way, but because it has white borders, the white edges don't bother me, right? Like with a lot of decks. So I'm very excited about that. Hi, Joe. Welcome. Glad you're here. So those are all of the goodies that came in this week. And if you want to see a full flip through of any of those, let me know. I'll be happy to do them. I often will post a link to my full tarot collection below so that you can tell me if there's something you want to see that I haven't posted before. But let's hop into this card because I don't really have as much to say about this card as I do about my practice in general of building my card deck. And it's because this card, right? This is the first court card to come up, and it brought up several issues with creating a tarot deck. One is, okay, do you keep the original names? And up until I got to the Empress 2 weeks ago, I have been keeping the originals, and I do refer to them as the Smith-Waite names, even though I've begun to alter some of the names to kind of be more modern, more inclusive, more, I don't know, modern really is the key thing. And I have actually gone back. I've renamed the Emperor, and I initially had debated renaming cards when I talked about the Hierophant, but I ended up keeping the Hierophant because I like the idea of the secrets. But since going back and renamed it as well on the actual card. And then the Empress, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, I called the Nurturer. And that brings up, like, so are these court cards going to be the King, the Queen, the Knight, and the Page in my deck? Or are they going to be something else? Because you have decks that rename them, some of which I have in my collection to show you today. And the other thing that comes up, which we'll talk about a little bit, is going to be gender. You know, should this be a man? Should this be a woman? Be someone queen? Also, the suits. You know, when I first started this project, I was thinking that the suits needed to be something more relatable. And while we can relate a little bit to coins, and we can relate a little bit to cups, I don't know that we really in everyday life relate to wands or to swords anymore. And so, what would be the equivalent in modern society? So, that was the third thing that really came up that I have to deal with as I'm working with the court cards. So let's look at some of the cards from my collection that I love and what I think works about them. This is the Fyodor Pavlov, and in this deck, it's very much Waite Smith inspired, but it's just beautiful artwork. I love that they did all of the cups in this blue. It has the romantic, emotional feeling that you tend to associate with this particular card. This is the slow tarot. It also, to me, it gives the um, action orientation of the knights, but also it's a little bit of a romantic thing. He's leaving the castle. Is he looking back because that's where his love is? Is he actually leaving home to go out and find his love? What is going on with him there? And of course, this might hurt. Uses the motorcycle instead of the horse, and a coffee cup versus the chalice we typically see. And you actually get that in several decks. You'll see that here in this kind of this also a Bito tarot, which kind of associates them with a um, homebody. Like it to me, it feels like a homebody, like someone who sits at home reading books, drinking coffee, kind of coffee house vibe to me, more so than anything. Um, it's an interesting card. The Pocket of Peers took a little bit of a different approach. It's more about the compassion that the knight feels. Here we see someone who's rescuing animals, and I kind of like that. There's our Lightseers Tarot, a little bit of a more modern approach. And this is probably closer to what I ended up coming with than any of the other cards. There's a guy with the flowers, there's a horse in the background, there's a picnic sort of there on the corner. And honestly, I did not even think of this card when I was creating mine, but I ended up with something very similar to this. If you haven't seen it, we'll show it in a little bit. Now, we talked about cards renaming the suits. So one example of that is the Hip Chick Tarot. In the Hip Chick Tarot, you have the child, the teen, the queen, and then the boss, which is your king card. Other cards that have renamed it do things like, say, in the Numinous Tarot, where this is the explorer. Your page is a dreamer, your queen is a creator, and the king is a mystic. I did end up calling mine the explorer, and we'll talk about why when we look at my card. Another name that sometimes comes up with this is like the apprentice, or trying to think what are the student type of energy. Now, some of the more interesting cards in my collection for the Knight of Cups are the Modern Love Tarot. This is the first time in the tarot that I had seen a hint at the fact that people may be interested in more than one person, or may be interested in men and women, or some combination thereof. It's not clear from the guidebook what's going on in this book, in this card. If it's just trying to express that, he is connected to other people, or if this is a throuple, or if it's that he is bisexual, or what's going on with this Knight of Cups. But it is an interesting take on the card for sure, and I like that it adds that little bit of diversity of relationships in there. The Mystic Garbage Tarot did all of the knights as like what's on their brain, like their what's on their shoulders. What is it that's um central to them? In this case, the knight wears his heart on his shoulders, or on his sleeve, so to speak, which is kind of a fun idea. Now, as I'm studying these, I'm also reading my books on the Thoth and studying the Thoth cards. And when you come to the knights and the kings, or the knights and the princes, in the Thoth, it gets a bit muddy and confusing because a lot of people do relate the princes with the knights in the Waite Smith. Um, and then they relate the knight of the Thoth with the king in the Waite Smith. However, when I have been studying the Thoth, to me, this prince is almost a different type of archetype than any of the existing archetypes in the courts of the Smith Waite. And this knight to me comes across as the actual knights, not as the king, in the way it feels, in the way it looks, in the meanings that I see in the books on Thoth. And so the biggest issue for me with the Thoth has always been this prince. It doesn't make any sense to me, even when I look at its place in the tree of life. It doesn't make any sense to me, and that's where Crawley really lost me, was when he did the court cards that way with that prince and that knight. So one of the first things I do every week as I start reading through my books is I will color the RWS based on my reading and see if there's anything I want to change. What are those things that, might be more meaningful to me, or that I think Waite got wrong. And so I didn't really change anything. I mean, I did take a little creative license with the coloring of his apparel to make it a little brighter and noticeable than in the others. But mainly, this is what that card image looks like. I really didn't change anything because I didn't think there was a need to. So let's talk a bit about this guy. So a lot of people call him the nice guy, or Prince Charming, the one who is romantic and charming, and they may be empathetic or sensitive, a dreamer, as it were. Imaginative is a word that comes up. Now, here's where an issue comes up for me with a lot of tarot decks. A lot of tarot decks think that because this is an artistic person, that this is an artist. But to me, this is the person who appreciates art, who has the imagination to appreciate creativity, to talk about it, and to enjoy it. The wands are the courts that would be your artist to me, because they're the ones manifesting it, creating. That's going to be your painters, that's going to be your poets, that's going to be your sculptors and authors. These are the people who are going to appreciate it. And of course, then you have the Pentacles, who are the people who are going to support the art, right? They're the ones who are going to pay for it. And to me, the swords, being the intellectuals and more practical group of people, really could care less about the art. It's nice if it's there, but they don't have a role in it particularly, right? And that's just my kind of way of separating that idea in my head. In the opposite, the Knight of Cups can be moody or jealous or clingy. To me, this is the card of a person who has reached adulthood or almost adulthood, but they haven't quite decided which route they're going to take, right? So are they going to go one direction or another? In this case, are they going to be the empathetic, sympathetic dreamer, like the queen energy, or are they going to be the more calm counselor that is basically the king energy. And so you can get some of both of that to me, the king and queen energy and the knight, as they're learning to embrace their specific element in their lives. And that's why I tend to view this as a teen to a college student, really, someone who's still learning and growing and maturing. So they might at different times express elements of either adult on the spectrum. Um, and so you will get points where they might be a mediator or they might be the peacekeeper, like, say, the king is, and other times where they're going to be empathetic and sympathetic, and they're going to hold you like the queen might in those emotional settings. So let's look at what I ended up creating. I will say that this was a very difficult card because as you look at the Knight of Cups in various books, you never know what they're going to say. And it's all very different. There are very different approaches to this card in almost every deck and in almost every book. And you kind of have to figure out, okay, how am I going to utilize it? How am I going to read with it? And again, it looks very much like the image from the wow, my brain. The Light Seers Tarot a bit. And it was totally unintentional. And I actually chose the pieces that I put into my image by what I was drawn to as I was trying to think about creating the deck and what I wanted in it. And it was only afterward, as happens with some of the decks, that I realized why each element is there. So for me, when I think about this, again, I think about a teen or college student still coming into their emotional maturity. I know for one, as a young person wanting to date, that I always wanted to create the most romantic atmosphere. And as I look back on this card after having finished it, I realized that all of these elements are a result of my dating life. For example, my very first date ever was at a Pizza Hut back in the 80s, wherein all of their tables were covered in red checkered tablecloths. And so I didn't know that's why I chose it at the time. But upon hindsight, thinking about how this card relates to me personally, I realized that that's something that has always stuck in my head. I've always had a fondness for this red checker pattern, and I only recently figured out where that came from. In college, I tried to rekindle a romance with a high school sweetheart, and we went to dinner, and the wait staff snuck us champagne. And so that reminds me of that episode in my life where I tried to rekindle that relationship. And that's one of the relationships in my life that's continued throughout my life. We're still friends on Facebook. We were good friends before we ever dated in high school and in college. And then the sunset, as I was later in college and right out of college, as I was dating, the two people I dated, we mainly spent our time on the beach because that's where we lived. And so there were lots of dates on the Sunset Beach and looking out at the sunset. And in fact, one of those people was eventually my fiance for almost 2 years before we realized we were going in completely different paths. One wanting to settle down and one wanting to move on to grad school. Which had originally been the plan for both of us, get married and go to grad school together. And then all of a sudden, one of us decided we wanted to just stay at home and have kids and not worry about grad school. So the last element in here that kind of draws on my life experience with romance and emotions are those pink roses. And I talked about this when I did the 9 of Pentacles, which I want to go back to at the very end of this video and talk about a second. And it is that my father has always grown pink roses for my mother from the time they have been married until today. And so the house that they live in, which they bought when I was 3, has pink roses all over the yard. And she has roses 9 months of the year. And that's why my first tattoo was actually a pink rose, because it reminds me of the commitment and the emotional connection that goes into a relationship that can last a lifetime. Welcome, Amy. um, and so that's really where I was going with this. Um, the unicorn was actually the last thing I added. And the reason why is I kept thinking, okay, should it have a horse in it? If it's really the night, should it have a horse in it? And I'm like, well, it is on a beach. Sometimes you see horses on beaches. Yes, that will be fine. And then the more I played around with the horse, I'm like thinking to myself, well, maybe I need to bring in the idea that this is an imaginative person. And so I decided to go with the unicorn, but I kept the unicorn as kind of a elusive thing, right? It's not real. It's imagined. So hence his imagination at work. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I actually did several versions of this card, and this is the one that I settled on because I haven't gotten any feedback from anyone. But let's look if I can here. At the other versions, and just give me your thoughts there in the comments. So here is the original one. Let me go. One of the things that I've been trying to figure out is how to do 2 cameras so that I can show you things while we talk about that. Let me find what. Oh, there it is. Okay, window. And I think it is this one, maybe. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right one. Nope, I'm sharing the wrong one. This is what happens when you have multiple windows open and you do things on the fly. All right, there we go. So this was the first image before I ever started playing with the horse and the eventually the unicorn. And from there, I added first it was a horse, and I couldn't quite make the horse work the way I wanted. It didn't want it to be a silhouette like the person, because the person was the focus. But then it just kind of evolved from there. I decided I couldn't have it a solid silhouette, and there wasn't really one that worked for me otherwise. And so then I made it a shadow. And then I realized that the shadow would have to be in the other direction because the sun is on the other side. And so I flipped it around. And I really disliked this image, which is why I decided to add the illusion of the unicorn in the background. I think I might could still play with this a little bit. Maybe instead of making it a black transparent, maybe it should be white or like a lighter gray color transparency. I like the illusion impact of it, but the fantasy animal, which brings up a good point. I don't know if any of you are following my TikToks or seeing them on Instagram, but one of with this card, rather than keywords, what I asked is, who do you picture here? And that's always my first thought when I see this card in a reading is, okay, who is that ideal person? Who is the person you want to be romantically involved with? If in fact that's something that you want in your life. So those are my thoughts on the night, but I do want to talk about a couple of things related to the deck creation process. I mentioned earlier the 9 of Pentacles. One of the things that I realized when I was working on this card was that, as often happens, I had not added the pips to the 9 of Pentacles. Oh, I passed it. And so I did go back and actually add the stones to represent the pips in this one. The pips have not been very noticeable in my cards. I've tried to keep them as part of the overall image. So like in several of the wands, it's simply the number of branches that are in the picture. And one of them is the number of signposts. And in the pentacles, this one, the stones were an obvious choice because of the garden. And then in my 10, I actually used the tree of life. So the orbs on the tree were the pips there. And so that's something that I do each week. As I'm looking at the newest card, I'll reflect back on the others to see what I might change. And I actually have updated, I think, almost every card at this point to some degree. So the final image is not going to be any of the ones that you've seen, though I haven't changed them significantly. When I say I've changed them, I've like maybe added a little something. Like say the snail was not in my original post on Instagram, or the stones were not in my final version that I shared on the video. But overall, the image was the same. And those are the things that I look at as I go through each week. And so this week I actually redid about 7 cards. Like I said, I renamed the Hierophant to the Chaplain, i.e. someone whose responsibility it is to help anyone on any spiritual path with comfort and counseling, and provide them educational opportunities in their path. And so and as I study each card, I learn something more about the tarot that I want to apply to other cards. So let's go ahead and draw our card for next week. Let's see what we're going to be working on. And while I'm shuffling, let me just go ahead and do a shout out for Tarot Stash's channel. Tarot Stash will be having me on for a casual on Tuesday, the 7th, at 5:30 Eastern time. So do hop in and check that out and see what things he might ask me. And our card for next week that we're going to be working with is the Devil. So this should be very interesting. I have lots of ideas in my mind of what I want the devil to look like. However, I don't know if I'll be able to achieve it or not with my Creative Commons imagery that I've been using, but we shall see. Yeah, this should be interesting. So, guys, thank you for being here and checking the video out. Do let me know your thoughts on the cards as you see them on Instagram and on Facebook, so that I can improve them and improve the guidebook for what I think people want as much as what I want in the tarot. This really was a personal project for me to put my life into the cards, but I really would like to know other people's thoughts as we go. So until next time, everyone, good journeys.